Here we can see in the guide transfer the ears kind of get a little bit of a kink going on in the ear first. So while in the guide deform you have a weird I want to go for the guide deform and fix the eyes because it's easier than fixing the ear. Because the ear fur is quite curly and that will be more difficult to fix in general in order to maintain the curls. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a group and use this group as mask input for length modifier and then in properly with the other fur. And yeah, we are just placing a sphere to mask out these areas so that we are using the group create node. And here you can see a point selection. It's very important to keep that on points. And then if you want to promote that to primitives, you can do that with an attribute promote. But yeah, the bounding object only works with the point selection. Here you can see the preview, which points are selected currently. We're going to call this ifix group. And then we're going to promote it from points to primitives, so the whole primitive will be affected instead of just the few. Here we can select our group. And then we will just drop a length modifier and connect the skin. And in the group section above, you can select your groups, and then it will only affect the groups that are currently in the selection. And this gives you a very sharp line, which might look a little bit unnatural, so I want to go for a more randomized version. And ruffle that up a little bit here. This gives you a more natural definition. We will connect this to the output here, group it in a nice field and cache it out. Another thing I want to fix is the mustache. It's currently very flat to the surface, and I feel like it can be a little bit more ruffled up. It's being the other skin. And I will use a lift node, which will just basically poke out my hair based on the tangents or normal of the skin. So you have multiple options. like lengths and randomize that a lot just to basically ruffle that area up and give more variation and make it look more natural in that sense. And that looks like it's a little bit too much currently, but yeah, it looks way better than before. Then we're at the body groom here. I will drop a attribute wrangle node. Usually in Houdini, when the width is being called, the length is what we are calling here. And by the CH ramp, we are creating a ramp and multiplying that with the CH, which is our width value that we assigned the string width value. And we have to write another line. Later on, because this is only basically assigning the width, the ramp value here. I'm just checking if it works overall. And then we basically have to multiply that with our current width value as well. But yeah, this is just checking. It takes a while to evaluate, but this is how it looks like. And keep in mind, you always need to run the width on the points. It's not a primitive value. Yeah, and we have to multiply our current width with our width ramp in order to affect that. If you have, for example, if you have information. So you have to add that to all the different nodes as well. It's not only on the body, it's also on the legs, etc. So I will just copy and paste it over from the body fur. And here it currently looks like the legs could have like a special treat where we go a little bit lower on the tips in order to make it look more naturalistic. At the moment, it's very thick, very coarse. So we will also paste that over here on the tail groom. Just paste it before you do the transfer. Usually I have a groom section in my hair graph, and then I have this length lookup, and then I have a cleanup pass, and then I'm doing the transfer. So the transfer will be always the last thing that you want to do there. What I don't like from the render view is how high the neckline extends the head, on top of the head. So I will try to bring that down a little bit by also creating a group. By going over groups instead of like certain primitive selections, you always ensure that when you change the density that it will still work with any kind of input you have instead of hard coding it to like a specific primitive count. So that is always the better solution, to go for something like that. I also could have fixed that in the guides. That would be another option as well. We'll use a length node only in that area. Select your group in the group selection, and then you can scope how. For example, it's very flat on the upper half of the head. So yeah, I want to go way shorter to what we have here. So now I will connect it to the end of the graph and also cache it at the end. Here I also added a background to test a little bit of rendering. For that I just created a box, blasted off a selection, basically placed it in the world space, gave it a color, like a color variation and a subdivision. And for the colors I just went over point selection, gave it a little bit of variance. Then I have an output, and this is how it looks like. Currently, the colors are being written as color information on the points. And I also loaded in textures for the skin. For that, I had like a photo projection saved as a TIFF that I use in the diffuse color and on the subsurface scattering colors. This is all I did basically. I won't cover how to create textures. I think that will be a texturing tutorial, but this is basically just like a projection of a photo textures just on the face and just on the parts that you see. I will make a copy of the cheeks, and I want to give it, you can see a render by the way on the right bottom. I want to give it a little bit more hair on the chest and on the belly area. I think that's what's lacking a little bit still in order to look correct. Also to really put an emphasis on the shapes and less on the very tall legs. Just do the same procedure that we did previously with the guide groom and the color that we're going to transfer. I'm just keeping these parts from the cheek set, and then I will place more guides here for this area. And see how I need to go in this active area here. Then we will generate some hair from it. And this is what I will feed into the hair clump. And as I can see is I have to go way higher than 1 in order to see something happening here. This can be due to word scaling, etc. So yeah, I want to add a frizz before it goes into the hair clump, and for the frizz I need to resample it a little bit higher to actually see what's going on there. And then it's very difficult to control frizzes in Houdini. It's not like the noise in XGen, for example. But yeah, I will test around a little bit. In some of the references, it's quite curly. On the right, it's very curly on the tips. I will also try to make them fade out a little bit more on the corners. We're going over the active area as mask input. Here we'll copy over the thickness attribute that we had with the randomized thickness. I want to add another frizz layer and another clump layer here. So I'm going to create a frizz inside of the clumps. Also more frizz on the roots. That's what I'm trying to do here first. And the second one will be driving our variation. But basically, animals like that always have like a downy fur that is usually very scraggled. And I'm trying to basically recreate that here with the more scraggle on the roots. So this creates a different like randomization inside of the main clumps itself. So usually when you're working with clumps, you always have like a main clumps or first form clumps and then second form clumps and third form clumps. It's very similar to sculpting. So you first work on the overall structure and then you go into detail. And yeah, we're trying to have the same feeling to clumps as well, usually when working with clumps. We'll also test how that looks like with curling activated. And I also tried to add a bend to add a little bit of variation, because you can see quite a lot of parallel lines still. So I'm trying to break that off with this bend node. I really like the look of it, but I feel like it doesn't look necessarily like the cat. Also try to add the variation to see if I can come up with a lucky seed or something, but yeah, this is how it looks like currently. Here we will rename this to belly add, and then for rendering purposes, I will just put it in our output as it is. You can see it's way too long, so I will decrease that a little bit here in the length node.